we've got to talk about probably the player who, not probably, certainly the player who has the most attention from general fans who follow the game, and that is Bronny James. Now, Bronny James is here. He has made it clear he intends to go through the draft process. On Monday, he went through the various combine activities, from the shooting to the athletic testing. He scored really well athletically. He made shots, two things that were not a surprise. The other thing that candidly wasn't a surprise were the measurements. We've seen him listed at 6'3", 6'4" throughout the course of his high school and college career, but was never officially measured in any high school setting, at least not one that became public like is often the case at USA Basketball or some of these bigger national camps. But he measured 6'1.5", 210 pounds, and again, tested really well athletically, though, showing off that vertical leap. Now, when it came to the gameplay, on Tuesday, the opening game, he struggled, didn't necessarily get into a great rhythm, had a nice floater that is trending on social media, but only had 4 points. Now, today it was a different story. He got into a much better rhythm and showed a lot of the same things that we've seen over the years that we thought would make him able to impact winning. First and foremost, he was able to make spot-up shots. Secondly, he was able to offer some secondary playmaking when the ball got reversed. That means, no, he wasn't the point guard, he wasn't the primary initiator, but whether it was in dribble handoff action or a second side pick and roll, he was able to get in the lane and make a play. And then third, he was able to do it on the defensive end of the floor. And we know he is an unselfish player and a ball mover. And that's very much the prototype since high school that we've expected him to have some success with. The other thing I should mention about Bronny, he did speak to the media yesterday. On Tuesday, he made it very clear that he wanted to be judged apart from his father and his father's legacy, really out here to make his own name for himself. But I got to tell you, it was an impressive media session for someone who has very rarely spoken to the media over the years. He seemed poised, he seemed at ease with himself, and just gave some very, I thought, real answers. You can check out Kyle Boone from CBS Sports. He's got some of that footage. But that was certainly a plus that we saw from Bronny this week. All right, when it comes to the players who have played well, we've got a number of guys that have really done well. First player I want to talk about in the game portions is KJ Simpson from Colorado. Now, this is a aggressive attacking guard who has really seized the moment here. Now, in Colorado, this was a guy who was often the alpha. He was the primary playmaker who would go and make plays, and he brought that same mentality with him here to Chicago. Again, there's a lot of players looking to distinguish themselves in this setting, but he was the player, particularly on Tuesday, that was able to do that. 16 points on day one. And day two, he came back and he finished with 11, 4, and 7. So he mixed it up a little bit in his encore performance, showing his ability to get others involved and also getting off the glass, which is something we saw at Colorado. The downside for Simpson, only measured 6 feet when you take a look at those official combine statistics. So that is going to be a question mark for NBA executives, is how does his size translate? I will offer this, though. We're at a point in time in NBA history where we have more undersized guards than ever, carving out successful careers for themselves in the league. So that is certainly a bonus for KJ Simpson. But again, in terms of the gameplay, he is really someone who has stood out. Another player who stood out on day one in particular was Baylor Scheierman. Now, Baylor Scheierman is a great example of a player who might not have played at this event in years past because he's considered a fringe first-round pick, very solidly in the second-round conversation. But when you were competing for a first-round spot, that means you were competing for guaranteed money. The interesting thing about Scheierman is that his NBA role could be vastly different than what we saw at Creighton when he was really a primary connector. He didn't shoot the three as well today on Wednesday, but I don't think there's any doubts about his shooting. And what has really stood out is his decision-making, overall feel for the game after the defense has already been broken down. So again, at Creighton, he's the primary creator. He's the first domino in their offense. In the NBA, though, he's going to be a floor spacer. He's going to be someone who makes open shots, who creates room for others to operate. And then once the offense is in advantage situations, who understands how to make quick, appropriate reads. And that is something that has really stood out in this setting. So I think Baylor Scheierman has really helped himself so far here in Chicago. Another player to talk about, Zach Edey. All right, now this is an interesting one. Zach has not taken part in the 5-on-5 action. But as we said, everyone participated in the testing on Monday. And he really, I think, helped himself in that setting. This guy measured in at 7'5" with shoes on. That is absolutely massive. He also has a 7'11" wingspan. And get this, a 9-foot, 7.5-inch standing reach. So that means flat-footed. This guy can go on his basically on his toes and touch the rim. He is absolutely huge, and the numbers backed it up here this weekend. The other thing I would say, there's a lot of talk about how his gait looked when he was running the floor in those sprinting drills, but in terms of his mobility, he exceeded expectations, even being better than Donovan Clingan in a number of couple areas. And I will say that has been a talking point here in Chicago. So Zach Edey, although he has not played 5-on-5, is someone who I think has helped himself here so far at the Combine. All right, another player who's helped himself so far, one of the stars of college basketball like Edey, is Jamal Shead from Houston. Now, if you recall, Shead went down with that ankle injury late in the season. That also limited some of his preparation coming in for this pre-draft process. But the heart and the will that made him one of the best and most tenacious guards in college basketball this season has carried through and is apparent in this setting. Now, he's a little undersized, but what NBA scouts love about him is just that bulldog mentality. You've been hearing a lot about the Jose Alvarado comparisons here this week because Shead is an elite on-ball defender. The thing he does not get enough credit for, quite frankly, is how smart of a player he is. When you start diving into the due diligence for Houston, you hear so many stories about his ability to understand what to run, to understand the schemes, to know exactly what the opposing team was trying to do. And that overall basketball IQ and leadership has come through in this setting as well. It's something that's been apparent. The key variable for Shead, can't do anything about his height, but teams want to see how well he shoots the basketball. And in particular, they are paying attention to his mechanics. And believe it or not, they're focused on these very nuanced type of things on his follow-through. There's been some talk about whether or not he finishes the shot like he did earlier in the season or if he's short-arming the shot. So those are some of the details that are being explored here this week. But Jamal Shead, another player who has really helped himself so far here in Houston. Let's keep this list going. I'm going to go back to someone who has not played in 5-on-5 action, but who helped themselves on Monday. And again, Monday was the part of the week that was dedicated entirely to the testing, and it escalated up to some 4-on-4 action. But the player who helped himself there was Devin Carter from Providence College. Devin Carter, widely considered to be one of the most competitive players in this draft. But on Monday, he proved that he is also one of the most explosive athletes in this draft. 42-inch max vertical, which is tied for number one, 35-inch standing vertical, and then he tied a combine record for the best overall sprint time. So again, this is someone who came in with a reputation of being an alpha competitor, having all the tools to project into a big-time defender, and now he has the metrics to back up that he has the athleticism to do just that. We saw what he could do offensively this year at Providence. It is not expected that he's going to play that type of alpha role at the NBA level, but in terms of his ability to fill a secondary role player type position, really helped himself on Monday. And this is a prospect now that could be flirting with the lottery. But when it comes to players who help themselves with the athletic testing, I don't think anyone did more than Reed Sheppard. Now, let's look back and talk about Reed Sheppard. Obviously, he was the most pleasant surprise in all of college basketball this year, especially in the freshman class. But for as good as he was with the defensive metrics for the shooting, one thing that I don't think anybody was expecting was for this guy to come into Chicago and set the highest mark here with a 42-inch max vertical leap. That's right, Reed Sheppard is the best leaper in this year's NBA draft combine. Now, I want you to think about what that could do for his NBA stock. You can't take that number you have to consider the context, because this is a drill in which the speed of the jump is not considered. Basically, you have all the time you want to load up. You're not amongst bodies, so it's not totally translatable to an NBA game. But nonetheless, this was a statement type number for Reed Sheppard, and the latest data point that he can use as he potentially continues to climb up this draft board. So he is certainly a winner here in Chicago. And again, not surprisingly, the jumper looked very good in those shooting drills on Monday as well. Reed Sheppard, definitely one of the biggest winners here. Want to talk about a mid-major player who has helped themselves here in Chicago, and that is San Francisco's Jonathan Mogbo. Now, only measured 6'6.5", so a little undersized, but if you watched him this year at San Francisco, you know this guy is a double-double machine, just an absolute warrior and tremendous on the glass. What has been interesting about him in this setting is that he showed some expanded ball skills here. He's been able to take the ball off the defensive glass and start the break. They even let him run a pick and roll on Tuesday. And then the physicality has continued to pop in this setting. He may be 6'6.5" without shoes on, but he measured with a plus 6.5 foot wingspan. That is absolutely massive. And on top of that, he's got a 9 foot plus standing reach. So a little undersized for a 4, maybe even an undersized 5-man, but certainly has the length to compensate. And he's showing more ball skills than maybe we knew we had. So it's going to be a really interesting decision. Does he go back to San Francisco and try and play his way into the first round next year? Or does he take advantage of what certainly seems like a chance to get taken in the second round, a chance to earn a 2-way contract? That is going to be a very interesting decision with ramifications that will be felt in mid-major basketball next year. I'd say the biggest standout today on Wednesday, the second day of the games, I'm going to go with Adem Bona from UCLA. He was not necessarily the leading scorer, but his length and athleticism, they really came through in this setting. He scored in double figures, but more than that, he was an emphatic finisher. He blocked shots, and he flew in to rebound the ball outside his area with 2 hands. So the reason why that's important is because that's the role he's going to play at the NBA level. You see a lot of guys approaching the combine playing the game they did in college, but that doesn't necessarily translate. For Bona, what he did at the combine does translate to the NBA level. Run, finish, block shots, rebound. He's showing the power to be able to guard 5 men, even though he's a little undersized for that position. But definitely a good day for Adem Bona, another guy who's fighting for a guaranteed contract in next month's draft. All right, that was a quick look at some of the standouts here. Don't go anywhere, as we're going to continue to talk about some of the pending stay or go decisions. For more NBA draft coverage, please make sure to visit cbssports.com. I've been here. Kyle Boone has been here all week long. Isaac Trotter has been here all week long, and the coverage is nonstop over there. cbssports.com for the latest leading up to the draft on June 26th and 27th, because remember, this is a 2-day affair for the first time in NBA draft history this year.